0:40 a.m., high desert north of Elko, Nevada. 71 vehicles rolled dark across the scrubland, headlights off, engines throttled low against the pre-dawn silence. Two armored personnel carriers led the column. Behind them, a Bearcat, a mobile command unit, and a procession of ATF and FBI tactical rigs stretching a quarter-mile back into the darkness. The target? A 600-acre parcel registered as a private religious retreat. The Refuge Order of the Rising Land. 84 residents. No public utilities. No outside vendors. No reason on paper to notice. Underneath that description, 4,100 untraced rifles, a buried CONEX bunker, and a machine shop running at industrial tolerances. The operation had been building for 6 years. It started with one name on a gun show form. The 443 form is the federal firearms transaction record. Every licensed dealer fills one out for every sale. Name, address, date of birth, citizenship status, and a serial number for every weapon transferred.
Right.
At a Reno gun show in November 2019, a routine compliance audit by ATF's Industry Operations Division flagged something small. One buyer had appeared on 473 forms at 3 separate vendor tables over 2 days. Different vendors, same name, same Nevada address. 11 purchases total, all stripped lower receivers, all 80% complete, none legally defined as firearms under federal statute at point of sale. Individually, none of it was illegal. Aggregated, it was a pattern. The buyer's name led to a Shell LLC registered in Wyoming. The LLC had a freight account. The freight account had a delivery address, a rural parcel outside Elko, Nevada, approximately 38 miles from the nearest town. ATF's Denver Field Division assigned Special Agent Carla Odom to run a preliminary assessment. What she found warranted more than a preliminary assessment. Surveillance footage from an undercover vehicle parked along the freight access road outside the compound's main gate documented delivery after delivery across a span of months. Dash camera recordings show a freight broker's truck making repeated runs, palletized loads offloaded through the gate by compound members. Hidden camera surveillance installed near the Salt Lake City brokerage captured CS1 meeting with couriers, manifests changing hands. The shipments looked routine on paper, machine components, hand tools, agricultural supplies, until ATF analysts pulled a December 2019 manifest and flagged a single-line item. 800 kilograms of 4140 chromoly steel bar stock, the material used for precision rifle barrels. Drone surveillance footage from 6 weeks later showed another delivery, a full pallet run through the same gate. That shipment, cross-referenced against import records, traced back to 1,200 polymer 80% lower receiver blanks routed from a Turkish supplier through Rotterdam. 80% receivers are legal. They're sold as unfinished components below the federal threshold that defines a firearm. The buyer does the final machining, and the resulting weapon has no serial number, no registration trail, no 4473 paper. These are called ghost guns. One hobbyist finishing a single lower in a home shop is not a federal priority, but 1,200 units arriving at one address was a different calculation entirely. Odom requested authorization to develop a source inside the compound's parts pipeline. Authorization came through in January 2020, 6 years before the raid. What's most surprising about this case isn't the scale of the weapons cache, it's how long it operated cleanly. 6 years of procurement, manufacturing, and distribution in a region with sparse federal presence and no complaints from neighboring landowners. The infrastructure worked because it was designed not to attract attention. The compound maintained strict internal communications protocols. No cellular phones, no internet access from within the perimeter. Community members who needed outside contact used a single shared landline in the administrative building, and those calls were logged internally. Visitors were not permitted. Mail was received at a P.O. box in Elko and transported by a designated community member once weekly. From the outside, the Refuge Order looked like what it claimed to be, a quiet community of adults who had chosen to remove themselves from modern society. Inside, it was running at a different pace entirely. Undercover surveillance footage from the Salt Lake City freight brokerage shows CS1 at his desk, receiving calls, processing orders, pulling manifests. 8 months of business with the compound's purchasing LLC documented across hidden camera surveillance recordings that ATF analysts combed through after he agreed to cooperate. His access was logistical. He never crossed the compound gate, but the ordering patterns he handed over gave agents a procurement timeline they could follow. Evidence collection documentation assembled from those records showed approximately 4,800 stripped lower receiver blanks ordered between late 2019 and mid-2025. Cross-referencing corresponding orders for barrel blanks, bolt carrier groups, and finishing hardware, ATF analysts built their estimate roughly 85% successfully completed into functional rifles. 4,080 units, minimum. Federal agents moving through the compound's northeast quadrant reached the converted-out building on the first sweep. Body camera footage shows them pushing through the main doors into a space fitted out to industrial standards, milling machines bolted to reinforced flooring, a gang drill press mounted on a steel frame, fixturing racked along the near wall. Forensic photography captured the shop in full. A CNC conversion unit still powered on, temperature-controlled finishing equipment along the back wall, and workbenches covered in aluminum and polymer components at various stages of completion. ATF analysts reviewing the footage estimated this single structure had the throughput capacity to complete 40 to 60 unserialized rifle lowers per month at peak. No federal firearms manufacturer's license was posted anywhere on the premises. I went through the procurement timeline in the case file, and one detail kept coming back. The compound never ordered in quantities that would have triggered automatic freight carrier reporting thresholds. Every order was structured to stay below the flag lines. That kind of operational awareness is not accidental. By mid-2021, Odom's team had a clear picture of procurement and an estimated production volume. What they did not have was evidence of distribution. Rifles that never leave a compound, however illegally manufactured, present a different legal profile than rifles entering commerce. The distribution evidence came from a separate thread. In April 2021, a Nevada State Police traffic stop on US 93 south of Wells produced a vehicle search that turned up 3 unserialized AR pattern rifles in a concealed compartment behind the rear seat. The driver, a man in his mid-30s with a Nevada address, refused to provide the source of the weapons. The rifles were seized and submitted to ATF's National Tracing Center. No serial numbers, no manufacturer markings. The barrel steel composition, tested at the ATF Forensic Laboratory in Martinsburg, West Virginia, matched the chromoly bar stock specification from CS1's freight manifests. It was not a confirmation. Chromoly barrel steel is widely used, but it was a thread. Odom's team began building a surveillance net around the compound's logistical perimeter. Not inside the perimeter, that would have required more legal foundation than they had, but around it. The P.O. box in Elko, the designated community member who made weekly mail runs, the freight depot where larger shipments were received. Over the following 18 months, patient surveillance work identified a pattern of outbound vehicle movements that did not fit the compound's stated operations. Approximately once every 3 weeks, a pickup truck departed the compound in the early morning hours and traveled south on US 93. The truck made no stops in Elko. It continued south or southwest before dropping off surveillance coverage due to terrain limitations. ATF requested and received authority to deploy aerial surveillance assets for selected tracking runs. The first successful full track in October 2022 followed the pickup 340 miles to a storage facility on the outskirts of Henderson, Nevada. The driver carried a duffel bag inside and departed 22 minutes later without it. Agents who obtained a warrant and searched the unit 3 days later found 47 unserialized rifles in hard cases, along with 11 boxes of 5.56mm ammunition and a spiral-bound ledger. The ledger was handwritten. It listed initials, dates, unit counts, and dollar amounts in columns. No full names, no addresses, but it documented 23 completed transactions across 14 months, totaling 340 rifles and approximately $340,000 in cash payments. The buyer initials appeared 7 distinct times. Analysts cross-referencing those notations with known firearms trafficking networks identified probable matches for buyers in Nevada, Utah, Arizona, Idaho, Montana, Washington, and Colorado. Here's what this tells us about the ghost gun problem at this scale. The Refuge Order was not exceptional in its methods. The methods were documented, known, and spreading. What was exceptional was the duration. 6 years from first flag to raid is a long operational runway, and the compound used every month of it. Put yourself in Odom's position in early 2023. You have 6 years of procurement records, aerial surveillance footage, a recovered ledger, and barrel steel composition matches. What you do not have is a human source inside the compound's leadership. CS1 can tell you what was ordered. He cannot tell you who made the operational decisions, who handled the distribution ledger, who managed the cash proceeds, or whether the 4 men who ran the machine shop knew the full scope of what they were building. Going in without that information meant going in without knowing exactly what you were walking into. Odom's team spent 2023 and the first half of 2024 building the human picture through indirect means. Financial records subpoenaed from the freight brokerage showed the compound's LLC making cash deposits at an Elko bank branch on an irregular schedule, totaling approximately $1.2 million over 4 years. The deposits were always under $10,000, always in cash, always documented as charitable contributions or community fund proceeds, structuring the deliberate breaking of cash transactions into amounts below federal reporting thresholds. That alone was a separate federal crime and added financial charges to the building case. The compound's leadership, as identified through incorporation documents, freight account records, and the surveillance work, consisted of 4 adult men. The case file identified them in court documents by first names. Garrett, the compound's registered agent, and primary financial administrator Marcus, who managed procurement and freight logistics. Theodore, who oversaw the machine shop operations, and Lane, who handled what internal documents described as community outreach, which ATF analysts assessed as the distribution function. By late 2024, the case was strong. Odom and her supervisors at ATF's Denver Field Division began building the prosecution package with the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Nevada. Charges under consideration included conspiracy to manufacture firearms without a license, conspiracy to transfer unregistered firearms, structuring financial transactions, and conspiracy to distribute weapons across state lines. The question was not whether to move, it was when and how. The compound presented tactical challenges that required careful planning. 620 acres is a large perimeter. 84 residents meant a significant population who were not named suspects and would need to be managed carefully during any enforcement action. The buried CONEX bunker, which aerial thermal imaging had identified by late 2023 as a large subsurface structure in the southeast quadrant, was an unknown. Its contents were suspected but not confirmed until after the raid. ATF's Special Response Team from the Denver Field Division would lead the breach. FBI Hostage Rescue Team would provide tactical support and perimeter security. Nevada State Police Tactical Unit would handle outer perimeter and road closures across a 6-mile radius. The convoy brief called for 71 vehicles total. 2 armored personnel carriers would breach the main gate. The Bearcat would follow into the outbuilding row where the machine shop was located. 14 agents in the entry stack. Simultaneous secondary teams would move on the administrative building and the residential structures. The operational decision point, execute before winter weather made the approach roads unreliable, but with enough preparation time to ensure all 71 vehicles were in position and communication ready.
The date was set for July 18, 2026.
Pre-dawn movement, 0440 breach. Dash camera footage from the lead vehicle captures the convoy departing the Nevada Department of Transportation staging yard north of Elko at 04:15 a.m., 71 vehicles moving in blackout configuration, no headlights, the column visible only in the green cast of night vision. The approach road turns to unpaved gravel for the final 6 miles. Thermal imaging surveillance mounted to the SWAT command vehicle sweeps the terrain ahead, picking up no movement. Night vision cockpit feeds from the aerial unit overhead show the compound structures cold and still in the pre-dawn air. Inside the mobile command unit, agents watch the surveillance monitor wall as the convoy closes the final distance. Federal agents are 22 minutes out. There's a line in the operational log that reads almost like fiction. At 04:37 a.m., 3 minutes before breach, a single light came on in the administrative building. 1 window, ground floor. The entry team held position for 90 seconds. The light went off. The entry commander assessed it as a bathroom visit by a resident who had no knowledge of what was outside the perimeter. The hold ended. The column resumed movement. At 04:30 a.m., the 2 armored vehicles hit the main gate simultaneously. The gate was a standard agricultural metal gate, padlocked. It came off its hinges in under 4 seconds. The Bearcat followed through the opening and turned east toward the outbuilding row. The 14-man entry stack was moving before the dust settled. ATF agents reached the machine shop outbuilding at 04:43 a.m. The structure was locked with a commercial-grade deadbolt and a padlock hasp. Bolt cutters on the hasp, ram on the deadbolt. Entry in 11 seconds, inside. A fully equipped small arms manufacturing facility. 2 milling machines, a gang drill press, fixture jigs for lower receiver completion, a wall of organized parts bins labeled by component type, and on a long workbench along the north wall, 23 partially completed lower receivers in various stages of machining, laid out in sequence as if the morning shift was expected. Agents secured the room and called it in. Simultaneously, 3 teams moved on the residential structures. 84 residents were roused and directed to a central assembly area in the compound's main courtyard. None resisted. Most complied with instructions before agents reached individual doors. The 4 men identified as compound leadership were located within 12 minutes of breach. Garrett was in the administrative building. Marcus was in a residential cabin on the west end. Theodore was in a bunk room adjacent to the machine shop outbuilding, apparently sleeping within 30 feet of the evidence. Lane was in the south residential block. All 4 surrendered without incident. All 4 were in custody by 05:02 a.m., 22 minutes after first breach. The CONEX bunker took longer. Thermal imaging had placed it in the southeast quadrant, but the surface entrance was concealed under a false floor in what appeared to be an equipment storage shed. ATF Evidence Response Team agents found the hatch at 06:15 a.m., nearly 2 hours into the operation. The hatch opened onto a steel staircase descending approximately 120,000 rounds of 5.56 millimeters ammunition in sealed cases. The weapons were tagged, photographed, and catalogued over the following 14 hours by a rotating team of ATF evidence specialists. The count, 4,100 rifles confirmed. The production timeline, based on the machine shop's operational capacity and the procurement records, suggested the inventory had accumulated over approximately 4 years of manufacturing. ATF's post-raid assessment estimated the street distribution value of 4,100 unserialized rifles at between $3.2 million and $4.8 million, depending on regional market pricing. The recovered ledger from the Henderson storage unit and a second ledger found in Garrett's administrative office during the search documented a total of 847 rifles sold through distribution channels between 2021 and late 2025. Those sales generated an estimated $847,000 in cash proceeds. 347 rifles from documented sales remain unrecovered. They are in circulation across 7 states. Here's something that does not fit cleanly into the success narrative. The 6-year investigative timeline that produced this raid also produced 6 years of distribution. 847 rifles entered untraced circulation during the investigation window. The investigative caution that built the case strong enough for prosecution is also the reason those weapons exist in buyers' hands today. There is no clean answer to that trade-off, but it deserves to be stated plainly. What do you think? Did the system strike the right balance between building an airtight case and stopping the distribution, or did 6 years of patience come at too high a cost? Drop your answer in the comments. Garrett, Marcus, Theodore, and Lane were transported to the Elko County Detention Center following processing at the site. All 4 were subsequently transferred to federal custody. Initial appearances before a federal magistrate judge in Reno were scheduled for July 24, 2026. The charges filed by the U.S. Attorney for the District of Nevada: conspiracy to manufacture firearms without a federal license, conspiracy to transfer unregistered firearms, conspiracy to distribute firearms across state lines, and structuring of financial transactions. The manufacturing and distribution conspiracy charges each carry maximum sentences of up to 20 years. Structuring carries up to 5 years per count. The 84 compound residents who were not named in the indictment were interviewed on site by FBI agents over a period of approximately 9 hours on July 18. Based on those interviews, federal prosecutors determined that the majority of residents had no direct knowledge of the weapons manufacturing operation. The machine shop and the CONEX bunker were presented to the community as off-limits areas. Residents were told they contained equipment maintenance operations and supply storage. Most of them believed it. Those residents were permitted to remain on the property pending determination of its legal status. The compound parcel and all structures on it were seized as proceeds of criminal activity under federal forfeiture statutes. Legal proceedings regarding the property remain ongoing. The Turkish-sourced barrel blank supplier used by the compound's LLC remains under investigation. The freight brokerage in Salt Lake City is cooperating with federal authorities. CS1, the source who provided 6 years of procurement intelligence, had his cooperation agreement resolved prior to the raid. His identity has not been made public. The 347 rifles documented as sold but not recovered are the open thread. ATF has shared the ledger data with field divisions in Nevada, Utah, Arizona, Idaho, Montana, Washington, and Colorado. Tracing unserialized weapons is slow work. No serial number means no direct ATF trace. Investigators work from the ledger notations, from CS1's records of when specific components were shipped, and from any weapons that surface in subsequent arrests or crime scene recoveries. Some will be found, most will not. That is the nature of a distribution network built specifically to leave no paper trail. 6 years of federal work. 1 gun show audit. 71 vehicles in a pre-dawn convoy. 4 men in custody. 4,100 rifles in an evidence facility in Reno. 347 rifles somewhere in 7 states, with no serial numbers and no record of where they are. The compound is empty. The demand that produced it still exists. If cases like this one matter to you, the long investigations, the buried infrastructure, the questions that outlast the arrests, subscribe so you don't miss what comes next.